Continuation of Pollyanna. Chapter 22, Sermons and Woodboxes. On the afternoon that Pollyanna told John Pendleton of Jimmy Bean, the Reverend Paul Ford climbed the hill and entered the Pendleton woods, hoping that the hush beauty of God's out-of-doors would still the tumult that his children of men had wrought. The Reverend Paul Ford was sick at heart. Month by month for a year past, conditions in the parish under him had been growing worse and worse, until it seemed that now, turn which way he would, he encountered only wrangling, backbiting, scandal, and jealousy. He had argued, pleaded, rebuked, and ignored by turns, and always and through all he had prayed, earnestly, hopefully. But today, immeasurably, he was forced to own that matters were no better, but rather worse. Two of his deacons were at swords' points over a silly something that only endless brooding had made of any count. Three of his most energetic women workers had withdrawn from the Ladies' Aid Society because a tiny spark of gossip had been fanned by wagging tongues into a devouring flame of scandal. The choir had split over the amount of solo work given to a fancied preferred singer. Even the Christian Endeavor Society was in a ferment of unrest owing to open criticism of two of its officers. As to the Sunday school, it had been the resignation of its superintendents and two of its teachers that had been the last straw, and that had sent the harassed minister to the quiet woods for prayer and meditation. Under the green arch of the trees, the Reverend Paul Ford facing the thing squarely. To his mind, the crisis had come. Something must be done, and done at once. The entire work of the church was at a standstill. The Sunday services, the weekday prayer meeting, the missionary teas, even the suppers and socials, were becoming less and less well attended. True, a few conscientious workers were still left, but they pulled at cross purposes. Usually, and always, they showed themselves to be acutely aware of the critical eyes all about them, and of the tongues that had nothing to do but to talk about what the eyes saw. And because of all this, the Reverend Paul Ford understood very well that he, God's minister, the church, the town, and even Christianity itself was suffering, and must suffer still more unless. Clearly something must be done, and done at once. But what? Slowly the minister took from the pocket the notes he had made for his next Sunday's sermon. Frowningly he looked at them, his mouth settled into stern lines. As aloud, very impressively, he read the verse on which he had determined to speak. But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For ye neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye them that are entering to go in. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye pay tithe and mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. It was a bitter denunciation. In the green aisles of the woods, the minister's deep voice rang out with scathing effect. Even the birds and squirrels seemed hushed into awed silence. It brought to the minister a vivid realization of how those words would sound the next Sunday, when he should utter them before his people in the sacred hush of the church. His people? They were his people. Could he do it? Dare he do it? Dare he not do it? It was a fearful denunciation, even without the words that would follow. His own words He had prayed and prayed. He had pleaded earnestly for help, for guidance. He longed, oh, how earnestly he longed, to take now, in this crisis, the right step. But was this the right step? Slowly the minister folded the papers and thrust them back in his pocket. Then, with a sigh that was almost a moan, he flung himself down at the foot of a tree and covered his face with his hands. It was there that Pollyanna, on her way home from the Pendleton house, found him. With a little cry, she ran forward. "Oh, Mr. Ford, you haven't broken your leg or anything, have you?" she gasped. The minister dropped his hands and looked up quickly. He tried to smile. "No, dear, no, indeed. I'm just resting." "Oh," sighed Pollyanna, falling back a little. "That's all right, then. You see, Mr. Pendleton had broken his leg when I found him. But he was laying down, though, and you're sitting up." "Yes, I'm sitting up, and I haven't broken anything. That doctors can mend." The last words were very low, but Pollyanna heard them, and a swift change crossed her face. Her eyes glowed with tender sympathy. "I know what you mean. Something plagued you. Father used to feel like that lots of times. I reckon ministers do, most generally. You see, there's such a lot depends on 'em, somehow." The Reverend Paul Ford turned a little wonderingly. "Was your father a minister, Pollyanna?" "Yes, sir. Didn't you know? I suppose everybody knew that. He married Aunt Polly's sister, and she was my mother." "Oh, I understand. But you see, I haven't been here many years, so I don't know all the family histories." "Yes, sir. No, sir," smiled Pollyanna. There was a long pause. The minister, still sitting at the foot of the tree, appeared to have forgotten Pollyanna's presence. He had pulled some papers from his pockets and unfolded them, but he was not looking at them. He was gazing instead at a leaf on the ground a little distance away. It was not even a pretty leaf. It was brown and dead. Pollyanna, looking at him, felt vaguely sorry for him. It's a nice day," she began hopefully. For a moment there was no answer, and then the minister looked up with a start. "What? Oh, yes, it's very nice." "And 'tisn't cold at all, either, even if 'tis October," observed Pollyanna, still more hopeful. Mr. Pendleton had a fire, but he had said he didn't need it. It was just to look at. I like to look at fires, don't you? There was no reply to this, though Pollyanna waited patiently before she tried again, by a new route. "Do you like being a minister?" The Reverend Paul Ford looked up now very quickly. "Do I like? Why, what an odd question. Why do you ask that, my dear?" "Nothing, only the way you look. It made me think of my father. He used to look like that sometimes." "Did he?" The minister's voice was polite, but his eyes had gone back to the dried leaf on the ground. "Yes, and I used to ask him, just as I did you, if he was glad to be a minister." The man under the tree smiled a little sadly. "Well, what did he say?" "Oh, he always said he was, of course, but most always he said, too, that he wouldn't stay a minister a minute if 'twasn't for the rejoicing texts." "The what?" The Reverend Paul Ford's eyes left the leaf and gazed wonderingly into Pollyanna's merry little face. "Well, that's what Father used to call 'em," she laughed. "Of course the Bible didn't name 'em that, but it's all those that begin, 'Be glad in the Lord,' or 'Rejoice greatly,' or 'Shout for joy,' and all that, you know. Such a lot of 'em. Once, when Father felt specially bad, he counted 'em. There were 800 of 'em." 800? "Yes, that told you to rejoice and be glad, you know. That's why Father named 'em the rejoicing texts." "Oh." There was an odd look on the minister's face. His eyes had fallen on the words on the top paper in his hands. But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees and hypocrites! And so your fathers like those rejoicing texts, he murmured. Oh, yes, nodded Pollyanna emphatically. He said he felt better right away, and first day he thought to count 'em. He said, and God took trouble to tell us 800 times to be glad and rejoice, he must want us to do it, some. And Father felt ashamed that he hadn't done it more. After that, they got to be such a comfort to him. You know, when things went wrong, when the ladies' aiders got to fight. I mean, when they didn't agree about something, corrected Pollyanna hastily. Why, it was those texts, too, Father said, that made him think of the game. He began with me on the crutches, but he said 'twas the rejoicing text that started him on it. And what game might that be? Asked the minister. About finding something in everything to be glad about, you know. As I said, he began with me on the crutches, and once more Pollyanna told her story, this time to a man who listened with tender eyes and understanding ears. A little later Pollyanna and the minister descended the hill, hand in hand. Pollyanna's face was radiant. Pollyanna loved to talk, and she had been talking now for some time. There seemed to be so many things about the game, her father, and the old home life that the minister wanted to know. At the foot of the hill, their ways parted, and Pollyanna, down one road, and the minister down another, walked on alone. In the Reverend Paul Ford's study that evening, the minister sat thinking. Near him on the desk lay a few loose sheets of paper, his sermon notes. Under the suspended pencil in his fingers lay other sheets of paper, blank, his sermon to be. But the minister was not thinking of what he had written or what he intended to write. In his imagination he was far away in a little western town with a missionary minister who was poor, sick, worried, and almost alone in the world, but who was poring over the Bible to find how many times his Lord and Master had told him to rejoice and be glad. After a time, with a long sigh, the Reverend Paul Ford aroused himself, came back from the far western town, and adjusted the sheets of paper under his hand. Matthew 23, 13, 14, and 23, he wrote, and then a gesture of impatience. He dropped his pencil and pulled toward him a magazine left on the desk by his wife a few minutes before. Listlessly, his tired eyes turned from photograph to photograph until these words arrested them. A father one day said to his son, Tom, who, he knew, had refused to fill his mother's wood box that morning, Tom, I am sure you'll be glad to go and bring in some wood for your mother. And without a word, Tom went. Why? Just because his father showed so plainly that he expected him to do the right thing. Suppose he said, Tom, I overheard what you said to your mother this morning, and I'm ashamed of you. Go at once and fill that wood box. I'll warrant that wood box would be empty yet, so far as Tom was concerned. On and on the minister read, a word here, a line there, a paragraph somewhere else. What men and women need is encouragement. Their natural resisting powers should be strengthened, not weakened. Instead of always harping on man's faults, tell him of his virtues. Try to pull him out of his rut of bad habits. Hold up to him his better self, his real self that can dare and do and win out. The influence of a beautiful, helpful, hopeful character is contagious and may revolutionize a whole town. People radiate what is in their minds and in their hearts. If a man feels kindly and obliging, his neighbors will feel that way too, before long. But if he scolds and scowls and criticizes, his neighbors will return scowl for scowl and add interest. When you look for the bad, expecting it, you will get it. When you know you will find the good, you will get that. Tell your son Tom, you know he'll be good to fill that woodbox, and then watch him start, alert and interested. The minister dropped the paper. and lifted his chin. In a moment he was on his feet, tramping the narrow room back and forth, back and forth. Later, some time later, he drew a long breath and dropped himself in the chair at his desk. God helping me, I will do it, he cried softly. I'll tell all my Toms I know they'll be good and glad to fill that woodbox. I'll give them work to do, and I'll make them so full of the very joy of doing it that they won't have time to look at their neighbors' woodboxes. And he picked up his sermon notes, tore straight through the sheets, and cast them from him, so that on one side of his chair lay, "But woe unto you," and on the other, "Scribes and Pharisees and hypocrites," while across the smooth white paper before his pencil fairly flew, after first drawing one black line through Matthew 23, 13, 14, and 23. Thus it happened that the Reverend Paul Ford's sermon the next Sunday was a veritable bugle call to the best that was in every man and woman and child that heard it, and its text was one of Pollyanna's shining 800. Be glad in the Lord and rejoice, be righteous and shout for joy, all ye that are upright in heart. Chapter 23, An Accident. At Mrs. Snow's request, Pollyanna went one day to Dr. Chilton's office to get the name of the medicine which Mrs. Snow had forgotten. As it chanced, Pollyanna had never before seen the inside of Dr. Chilton's office. "I've never been to your home before. This is your home, isn't it?" she said, looking interestedly about her. The doctor smiled a little sadly. "Yes, such as it is," he answered, as he wrote something on the pad of paper in his hand. "But it's a pretty poor apology for a home, Pollyanna. They're just rooms, that's all, not a home." Pollyanna nodded her head wisely. Her eyes glowed with sympathetic understanding. "I know. It takes a woman's hand and a heart or a child's presence to make a home," she said. "Huh?" The doctor wheeled about abruptly. "Mr. Pendleton told me," nodded Pollyanna again. "About the woman's hand and heart, or the child's presence, you know." "Why don't you get a woman's hand and a heart, Dr. Chilton? Or maybe you'd like Jimmy Bean, if Mr. Pendleton doesn't want him." Dr. Chilton laughed a little constrainedly. "So Mr. Pendleton says it takes a woman's hand and heart to make a home, does he?" he asked. "Yes. He says his is just a house, too. Why don't you, Dr. Chilton?" "Why don't I what?" The doctor had turned back to his desk. "Get a woman's hand and heart. Oh, and I forgot." Pollyanna's face showed suddenly a painful color. "I suppose I ought to tell you. It wasn't Aunt Polly that Mr. Pendleton loved long ago, and so we aren't going there to live. You see, I told you it was, but I made a mistake. I hope you don't tell anyone," she finished anxiously. "No, I didn't tell anyone, Pollyanna." "Oh, that's all right then," sighed Pollyanna in relief. "You see, you're the only one I told, and I thought Mr. Pendleton looked sort of funny when I said I told you." "Did he?" The doctor's lips twitched. "Yes, and of course he wouldn't want many people to know it, when 'twasn't true. But why don't you get a woman's hand and heart, Dr. Chilton?" There was a moment's silence, and then very gravely the doctor said, "They're not always to be had for asking, little girl." Pollyanna frowned thoughtfully. "But I should think you could get 'em," she argued. The flattering emphasis was unmistakable. "Thank you," laughed the doctor, with uplifted eyebrows. Then gravely again, "I'm afraid some of your older sisters would not be quite so confident. At least they haven't shown themselves to be so obliging," he observed. Pollyanna frowned again. Then her eyes widened in surprise. "Why, Dr. Chilton, you don't mean you didn't try to get somebody's hand and heart once, like Mr. Pendleton, and couldn't, did you?" The doctor got to his feet a little abruptly. There, Pollyanna, never mind about that now. Don't let other people's troubles worry your little head. Suppose you run back now to Mrs. Snow. I've written down the name of the medicine and the directions how she is to take it." "Was there anything else?" Pollyanna shook her head. "No, sir, thank you, sir," she murmured soberly, and she turned towards the door. From the little hallway she called back, her face suddenly alight. "Anyhow, I'm glad 'twasn't my mother's hand and heart that you wanted and couldn't get, Dr. Chilton. Good-bye." It was on the last day of October that the accident occurred. Pollyanna, hurrying home from school, crossed the road at an apparently safe distance in front of a swiftly approaching motor car. Just what happened no one could seem to tell afterwards. Neither was there anyone found who could tell what had happened, or who was to blame that it did happen. Pollyanna, however, at 5 o'clock was borne limp and unconscious into the little room that was so dear to her. There, by a white-faced Aunt Polly and a weeping Nancy, she was undressed tenderly and put to bed, while from the village, hastily summoned by telephone, Dr. Warren was hurrying as fast as another motor car could bring him. "And you needn't have more'n looked at Aunt's face," Nancy was sobbing to Tom in the garden, after the doctor had arrived and was closeted in the hushed room. "You didn't need to more'n look at her Aunt's face to see that 'twasn't no duty that was what eatin' at her. Your hands don't shake, and your eyes don't look as if you was tryin' to hold back the angel of death himself when you're just doin' your duty, Mr. Tom. You don't. Is she hurt bad?" Old Tom's voice shook. "There ain't no tellin'," sobbed Nancy. "She lay back that white and still. She must easy be dead. But Miss Polly said she wasn't dead, and Miss Polly had oughter know if anyone would. She kept up such a listenin' and feelin' for her heart beat and her breath. Couldn't you tell anything what it doin' to her? That, Old Tom's face worked convulsively. Nancy's lips relaxed a little. "I wish you would call it something, Mr. Tom. Something good and strong, too. Dare think of its running down our little girl. I always hated the evil-smelling things, anyhow. I did. But where is she hurt?" I don't know, moaned Nancy. "There's a little cut on her blessed head, but 'tain't bad. That ain't. Miss Polly says it's afraid it's infernally she's hurt." A faint flicker came into Tom's eyes. "I guess you mean internally, Nancy," he said dryly. "She's hurt internally, all right. Plague take that automobile. But I don't guess Miss Polly'll be using that word all the same." "Huh? Well, I don't know, moaned Nancy with a shake of her head as she turned away. "Seems as if I just couldn't stand it till that doctor gets out here. I wish I had a wishin' ter do the biggest washin' I ever see. I do," she wailed, wringing her hands helplessly. Even after the doctor was gone, however, there seemed to be little that Nancy could tell Mr. Tom. There appeared to be no bones broken, and the cut was of slight consequence, but the doctor had looked very grave, had shaken his head slowly, and had said that time alone could tell. After he had gone, Miss Polly had shown a face even whiter and more drawn-looking than before. The patient had not fully recovered consciousness, but at present she seemed to be resting as comfortably as could be expected. A trained nurse had been sent for and would come that night. That was all, and Nancy turned soberingly and went back to her kitchen. It was some time during the next afternoon that Pollyanna opened conscious eyes and realized where she was. "Why, Aunt Polly, what's the matter? Is it daytime? Why don't I get up?" she cried. "Why, Aunt Polly, I can't get up," she moaned, falling back on the pillow after an ineffectual attempt to lift herself. "No, dear, I wouldn't try, just yet," soothed her aunt quickly but very quietly. But what's the matter? Why can't I get up? Miss Polly's eyes asked an agonized question of white-capped young woman standing in the window, out of a range of Pollyanna's eyes. The young woman nodded. "Tell her," the lips said. Miss Polly cleared her throat and tried to swallow the lump that would scarcely let her speak. "You were hurt, dear, by the automobile last night. But never mind that now. Auntie wants you to rest and go to sleep again." "Hurt? Oh, yes, I ran." Pollyanna's eyes were dazed. She lifted her hand to her forehead. "Why, it's done up, and it's hurt." "Yes, dear, but never mind, just rest." "But, Aunt Polly, I feel so funny and so bad. My legs feel so odd. Only they don't feel at all." With an imploring look at the nurse's face, Miss Polly struggled to her feet and turned away. The nurse came forward quickly. "Suppose you let me talk to you now," she began cheerily. "I'm sure I think it's high time we were getting acquainted, and I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Miss Hunt, and I've come to help your aunt take care of you. And the very first thing I'm going to do is to ask you to swallow these little white pills for me." Pollyanna's eyes grew a bit wild. "But I don't want to be taken care of. That is not for long. I want to get up. You know, I go to school. Can't I go to school tomorrow?" From the window where Aunt Polly stood now there came a half-stifled cry. "Tomorrow," smiled the nurse brightly. "Well, I may not let you out quite as soon as that, Miss Pollyanna, but just swallow these little pills for me, and we'll see what they'll do." "All right," agreed Pollyanna, somewhat doubtful. "But I must go to school day after tomorrow. There are examinations then, you know." She spoke again a minute later. She spoke of school and of the automobile and of how her head ached. But very soon her voice trailed into silence under the blessed influence of the little white pills she had swallowed. And we will continue the story next Wednesday. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.